Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Boogie Board Tiki Bar. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Jess Fields, who is the founder of JREV Solutions. She's outside of Detroit, Michigan, and I understand that today is the first snowfall of the year.
Snowfall, not ready for it, never am, but nonetheless, I still live here in Michigan.
I'm from Wisconsin, and I was always good with snow until January 1, and then I was just like, get me out of here. How do you deal with the whole season? Are you a winter person?
I tend to travel as much as possible, like January through March, and then you can survive. But good for you for getting out of this cold state.
Do you have any travel on the docket for next year?
Of course I do. I plan to celebrate the new year in Key West. So I've never done that before, but what a great way to start out the new year.
That sounds like a good decision for me. Now, the first question we always ask people, we want to understand their origin story. Nobody ever plans to become a chief sales officer and start a revenue focused business. So I want to talk to 10-year-old Jess for a minute and just say, what did you want to do when you're grown up?
So my dad was a police officer, and I just looked up to him so much. He was my hero. And I wanted to be in the FBI from a very young age. In fact, I even studied criminal justice at Michigan State University. And until college started to end and I started to look at career opportunities, I was still planning and putting applications to the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, you name it. I thought that's what I wanted to be.
Interesting. Then I'm looking at your LinkedIn right now. Your first job out of college is not with those agencies. What was the change?
So, life always throws curveballs. And I met my husband at Michigan State, and he was moving out to Kalamazoo, Michigan, to take a great job with Stryker. And so I followed him there. I thought, I could just put my dream on hold for a little bit. But once I got a taste of business, Kevin, it was no looking.
What was that taste that made you want to continue in? So your first job's with the EPI group. You're
That's
in
right.
Kalamazoo, home of the Western Michigan Broncos, if I believe, if I'm
That's
correct.
correct.
A guy from my high school went and played football there, and I remember he had this like they're brown, so he had like this brown hat that he would wear around. And so, okay, you're at EPI group. This taste somehow says I can't get enough of this. What is that taste?
So initially it was about the money, show me the money. And I'm starting to see income potential. And so that was part of it. But there was also some inspiration early in my career. And I'll never forget, I was working for this company, the EPI Group. And initially I was in account management. And we had just brought on this huge new account. If you remember Blockbuster back in the
Yeah.
day, we would do fulfillment for them. So we would be in the plant till 1, 2, sometimes 3 in the morning trying to get these shipments together and get organized to get all the right signage to all the right Blockbuster stores, to 2,200 of them across the country.
Wow.
And one night I was out stuffing envelopes, trying to get a shipment, begging you get some FedEx and pull their trucks away to jet. And I noticed a gentleman in a suit across the table, feverishly stuffing envelopes with the rest of us. And I couldn't help myself. I had to ask him, "Who are you?" He said, "Well, who are you?" I introduced myself. He says, "Well, I'm CEO of the company." And it just hit me then, the dedication to a customer and setting such a great example for everyone around me was so inspiring to me. And he became the leader that I stayed with for the next decade.
That's an awesome story. And so you're at this company for 10 years. It sounds like you started in account management. Can you take me through your kind of personal journey at that company?
It was wild. I have a curious brain, and so I just can't stay in my lane. And I know sometimes that's a bad thing, but in my career, it's been a very good thing to be curious about how things happen and why we do the things the way that we do. And this particular leader that I met on the floor, that night unleashed on him all the ideas that I saw to make the operation better. Just I've always been kind of fearless, just like why not? And he invited me to meet with some of his direct team leaders and started to give me more and more responsibility quickly, taking over supply chain, taking over purchasing, next taking over quality control. So I just had this real hunger and thirst to learn as much as possible about business. And that took me to, eventually running all of operations for the company, which included a very unique challenge, young in career, I was in my 20s. And I remember the day that he announced that I would be leading some very tenured general managers at each of the production plants. And here comes this 20 something blonde, like, yeah, what am I going to teach these guys? And I learned a lot during that time because it was a matter of like, how can I learn as much as I can from them, but also show them value and earn their trust. And it took some time, but eventually worked my way to building great relationships with these people and earn their trust to be their leader.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you're there for 10 years, so obviously you did something right. Was there a moment, an inflection point when you realized like, okay, I've got these folks on my side.
Think so. I think through some of the travels I did with them and meeting with suppliers, and they saw my knack for negotiation. That's always something that I've been really good at, and striking deals. And they started to give me a lead in more things. So I think traveling with them and having that one-on-one time to really get to know them and for them to get to know me was a breakthrough. And building relationships has been a pillar of how I operate in my entire career.
That makes sense. And as I look through your profile, you continued into leadership roles at other companies. Specifically, what intrigues me is the Sears Holding Corporation because you're there. It looks like in Chicago, and you start in a management role, but then you pretty quickly move into kind of more of an executive position. Can you tell us the story of your time with Sears Holdco?
This is a wild transition for me because I was in manufacturing and operations side of my career. And at the time, I had finished my MBA at Michigan State. Yes, I went to the same school, undergrad and grad. There was reasons for that. But some of the networks and people that I had access to serving on the Michigan State Board of Directors, I had met one of the presidents at Sears Holdings, and he was running all of home services. And he said, Jess, you should come do what you're doing for EPI, but do it for us at a broader scale. And what he was referring to is I'm starting to get into go. We had created 8 new companies at the EPI group, and I was a part of each of those and getting those off the ground and taking a product or a service or an idea or a concept to market and figuring out how it fits in the market. And at first I thought, well, Sears is for me. I mean, Sears, it's a big retailer. But he convinced me to come talk to the team at Sears, and I quickly fell in love with the vision they had for creating a commercial division, taking all the things in this $50 billion supply chain at Sears that was at the time pointed just into retail markets and tweaking that into a commercial solution. And so setting up a back end, which was in my wheelhouse, but also figuring out how do we take all these Kenmore appliances and Craftsman tools and fitness equipment, and lighting, and televisions, and point them into B2B markets, and which industries should we be focusing on? Property management, new builder construction, education. That was probably the most fun I had in my entire career, was having just this opportunity to build and create and to try. And probably the biggest takeaway from that, Kevin, was learning how to get things done in any given culture. The way things got done at EPI was very different at Sears. At Sears, I learned if you test and succeed in rapid succession, that would get you the resource. That, of course, is not the way things get done in other companies that I've worked for, but I learned, okay, every company, there's kind of a way that you can be successful by learning how decisions.
So you're still at a very young age trying all of these new things and really broadening your wheelhouse. Manufacturing operations, you talk about direct client relations, supply chain. Which of these, and you're building a whole new business basically for Sears, what was the hardest part for you in that learning curve?
I think it was learning how to continue to operate in a very pushy way, aggressive way,
Hmm.
potentially as a female, especially, but still earn the trust with people. And so that was something I had to navigate very carefully because people can view you as a railroader, something that is aggressive and pushy. But when you have an objective to accomplish, what I take away from that whole experience, and I teach my kids this today, it doesn't matter how it gets done. If you have to be extra nice to someone or you have to be a certain way to different people, the only thing, if you think about the result that you and don't worry so much about how it happens, if you have to swallow your ego or whatever the case may be, that was a big challenge at Sears, going from a smaller company, a 500 million company, up to a $50 billion organization, and taking those skills and applying them at a larger scale. Took a lot of intentional work in building those relationships. That's not to get a bad reputation.
Yeah, that makes sense. I felt that when I went to Google. I worked at a smaller company called NetSuite, which then was acquired by Oracle, but I'd never worked at a big company before. And you really have to kind of push to make connections. You have to push through some of the noise in a large company to find your way and to push your agenda, so to speak, which sounds intense, but it's just the way it works. I want to fast forward a little bit because you become the senior vice president of real estate strategy and operations at Rocket Homes. Now it sounds like you had sort of a flavor of real estate from Sears. Now you're moving into a senior executive position. Presumably, you're managing a bunch of people, and so there's some significant leadership implications in what you're doing. What made you want to join Rocket Homes?
So actually knew nothing about real estate, to be honest with you. I think it's that as a trend in my career as well as I feel like I'm industry agnostic. And that's so much fun for me because I think it's given me a really unique perspective of working in so many different industries, manufacturing, retail, payment technology, real estate, mortgage, and home services. Having the background in diverse industries really allows you to bring a unique way to get things done in other companies. So I've always seen that as an asset. But, the transition from my time at International Bank Card in payment technology to Rocket, which was Quicken at the time, Quicken Loans and their sister company, they were a client. I was working at the time and trying to open up. So it's emerging markets in payment technology. Back at that time, you couldn't use a debit card to pay mortgage or to pay your auto loan, for example. So I was working in these industries and partnering with big companies like Visa and MasterCard to figure out how can we get some companies to take some risks and to work with us to try to open up acceptance and the ease of paying the debit card instead of check or ACH for these types of loan payments. My work with Quicken led me to an opportunity of getting to know a lot of senior leaders at Quicken and Rocket, obviously. And I'm a sucker for big vision. And one of the leaders at Rocket was talking to me at the time about how Rocket was a mortgage powerhouse. But the limiting factor for them at the time was if someone gets their pre-approval for a home purchase with Rocket, let's say they to the Rocket Mortgage app or the website, and then they go to a Zillow or Realtor.com to shop for a home. They're getting advertised to by so many other lenders and real estate agents who then would pull them to their network of solution providers. So Rocket's idea at the time was, what if we could create this closed loop system? When someone gets their pre-approval, we assign the real estate agent. We have a home search solution. They won't leave our network, and we can bring higher conversion to the business that way. And so I wanted to be a part of that. So I jumped in. I didn't even have a role defined for me when I accepted the job at Rocket Homes. Just why? Like, why would you do that? You don't even know what your job is. But again, back to this, like, why not? Just try, just job, and have that confidence in yourself that you'll figure it out. And within a short amount of time, I was named head of the entire real estate network for Rocket Homes, which was managing all the business between Rocket Mortgage and real estate agents. And again, another cycle of like intense learning. Like, oh my gosh, I've never done this before. But coming in with fresh eyes can be a huge advantage.
Yeah. Tell me about that intense learning. Do you have a specific process that you're undertaking? Are you going and picking up books about, the mortgage industry? Or are you just meeting with everyone that you can and drinking from a fire hose? What does it actually look like?
I love that question. I think everyone has a different way of learning. My way of learning is with other people and through relationships. And so networking and asking people, hey, you're really good at this. I remember in particular, and I've talked about this in other interviews I've done in the real estate space, there was this woman, her name was Helen Valley with Berkshire Hathaway. And I always noticed her just at events and conferences, just being so graceful and knowing everyone in the room. I gotta talk to this woman. I gotta figure out like how she does this. And she brought me in close and she was so helpful. And she's like, this is a people business in real estate. Everyone knows everything. And so you have to invest in the personal relationships, and you can't do it from the ivory tower in Detroit called Rocket. You've got to get out in the field and you've got to build these personal face-to-face relationships. And she was so right. That was just such a platform for me to take that business to the next level through those personal relationships that haven't been built yet.
I love that. And you're now in kind of product and new company mode again. You're up the ladder at a big company. How would you describe the change in your leadership style from those early days when you're trying to get the manufacturing team on your side by hanging out and presumably going to the bar with them on the road trips, to now you're an executive at a corporate environment? How did you have to grow your leadership style over time?
That was probably the roughest transition from Rocket Homes, which was a smaller sister company, to the mothership, Rocket Mortgage. And I got an incredible opportunity to lead a new channel development. At the time, Rocket Mortgage was one big mortgage company, and they decided to chop it up into 7 channels of business. And I was tapped to run the real estate business, which meant any business coming in from real estate agents that we could originate those mortgages for, build relationships, and repeat business. So I went from this smaller team at Rocket Homes to having close to 300 people on my team, and I knew nothing about mortgage. And so that was a little bit scary. And I'll never forget, I jumped into that job and I'll figure it out. I'll learn it. I'll figure it out. And I wanted to get everyone on my new team on a call and stand up and have a town hall and talk about the things that we're going to accomplish together, a vision for the channel, and really setting that North Star. Everyone knows that's so important. And I got off that town hall and I was sitting with my VP team on my direct reports. And I said, how was that? Did it resonate? And one of the VPs had the guts to say that it was terrible, Jess. I thought he was kidding at first. I'm like, wait, what? He's like, that was really bad. Well, why? And he's like, well, people don't learn like that at Rocket Mortgage. Like, it's not a board. You can't come in and just robotically say, this is what we want to accomplish. People at Rocket Mortgage want to be moved. They want to be entertained. They want enthusiasm and excitement and things that catch them off guard. And so I learned this new style at Rocket Mortgage of an entertaining, accessible leadership style that I hadn't used in other companies before. And I brought it with me into the future. And sometimes people think I'm a little wild. I got on a town hall at Front Door, and I know we're going to talk about that company here in a minute. But and I had my team in Vegas at a conference, and I showed up with the entire executive team in a bathrobe and a towel on my head. And my CEO was texting me like, Jess, what are you doing? He's laughing because he trusts me. And I pretended like we're just taking it easy in Vegas, and then I rip off my, and I have a business suit on and I'm dressed, for the win. And I'm just kidding. We're here doing serious things. But after listening to 45 minutes of other people speak, in a town way, Jeff shows up in a bathrobe and it just catches people's attention. They like never know what's going to come from me next. And I love that sound that I learned at Rocket Mortgage.
That's really interesting. I feel that because I always prided myself on kind of being non-superfluous, whatever the opposite of superfluous is, like really focused, clear communication, direct. But I remember the first few times I was in front of teams and motivating, I was referred to kind of as robotic and boring. And it was like, okay, I guess doing some of these softer things, speaking in a more entertaining way, doing things like you and I are doing right now, like really has a way of resonating. So I can totally appreciate. Good on that VP for having the guts to tell you that it stunk.
Yeah, I know. I still think him to this day.
So then you become the chief sales officer at Front Door. What intrigues you about that opportunity?
The opportunity at Front Door was the first time truly in my career that I had access to the executive team with board facing responsibilities and investor as well. It's a publicly traded company, executive team, participation in things like investor days. That was a new level of experience I hadn't had before, and that's what was really so intriguing because I keep telling myself I need to go back and it's like I have this general management experience. My MBA is in integrative management, but I keep getting pulled into revenue roles, sales roles, and I think I'm letting that happen because it's just so natural for me. And it's just so much fun to play that game every day and to win and to compete. And sales just stirs me up.
So you mentioned that it's a new big challenge. When we initially talked about some of your earlier days and getting bit by the business bug, you're like, hey, I'm getting paid for the first time. But now you're talking about you're managing a ton of people, Presumably your calendar and Dan's card are like very full. What's motivating you at this point to say, I still need to take on the next challenge?
It's leading people, hands down. It's leading people. I've been accused of in my career being too much of an accessible leader because I love people so much. I think it's critically important to have an open door and make the time for people that have something to say. I also go into the field on the front lines with tier one salespeople, and I want to hear those conversations with customers. Even though that some of the roles I'm in don't require as much travel, I prefer to be on the road and understanding what the sales team is going through. And I love the conversations with them of what they're seeing, be able to bring some perspective to them. But it also helps me to know where people are coming from so that when I do talk at town halls or bring the teams together in large formats, I can really touch on the things that are important to them, that they're feeling, find these common threads. That's really such a pinnacle of building a culture is, in my opinion, is to be accessible, no matter how large your organization is.
When you're a chief sales officer and you've enjoyed all this leadership over time, I assume you're also finding the people that fit well with your type of ethos, with your type of organization. What was the right hiring profile for you when you're building out those teams? Who did you want?
I like people that come from smaller business and have really had to sell themselves and their own reputation as opposed to leaning on bigger brands.
Mm.
So I like when I'm hiring new people or growing the sales team, that's a profile that I like to look for. I also like ex-athletes. They're competitive. They love to win. You're posting numbers. You have leaderboards. They're always going to be striving for the top. So those are two of my favorite. I also tended to bring people from my past along when I can, when there's not a non-compete involved, because they already get it. They already know, like, we're going to go big. We're going to shoot for the stars. It takes a certain energy and excitement. I would rather be with someone who is green and excited than someone that has a lot of tenure and not bringing passion to the team.
Absolutely. And so I imagine you're looking for the person who's been in the late night shipping situation where they're stuffing the maybe the metaphorical envelopes here because you know that they have the grit to kind of develop into the next
Grit
level.
is a great word, Kevin. That's such a Detroit word too. So I'm glad you used that. My Detroit Lions have grit.
They do this year. I'm Green Bay Packers. We're going to see if they have grit. You know, they've got the right level of adversity coming at them. And we're approaching Thanksgiving when this interview is being recorded, so it's going to be a nice nighttime viewing experience for my family with my kids asleep. I get to watch a whole game.
Bring it, Kevin.
All right. So now I want to talk about JREV Solutions. Can you tell me first off what it is and what's the founding story?
Yeah. So I have always wanted to go out on my own and do something, again, I'm this fearless story. Why not? Why not try it? Doesn't work out. You can just go do something else. But because I have such a passion and a curiosity for how businesses work, it really lends itself to consulting. And so I've picked up a couple of opportunities in the real estate space, which I have now gained a lot of that experience in diving deep into their business to find those opportunities, to find those, unnoticed opportunities to make something bigger happen. And there's an approach that I use that I've developed throughout my career, and it's applicable to sales. I use this at Rocket, at Front Door, and now in my consulting career. And I stole what's called an ism from Rocket and family of companies, and it's called every client, every time, no exceptions, no excuses. I still know it by heart, and I haven't been at Rocket for a number of years. But what you can do is look at what I call the conveyor line, and it applies to sales as well. When I was at Front Door, we were looking at every lead or opportunity that comes in the door, whether it's B2B or direct consumer. Watch it go down sales conveyor. Watch every touch point of it. And if it hits the floor, why did it fall through? And the insights that you can find from taking random sampling of, call it 500, 200 lead opportunities, take half that closed and half that didn't, and just get extremely curious about why couldn't we close on this? And it could be like, well, we shouldn't have had that lead in the first place. Well, let's go upstream. Why did that lead break through our qualifying system? or it hit the floor, or why did it hit the floor? Could we have prevented it from hitting the floor? And I bring that approach to consulting. It's just such a great way to learn someone's business and see the intricacies that add up to something.
I think there's some Detroit in your answer as well, because it's the customer journey concept, but performed as a conveyor belt manufacturing process. So that makes a ton of sense to me. And I was going to ask that because you mentioned you're industry agnostic, but you're also departmentally agnostic. You've pretty much done all of these things. And I was going to ask, how do you decide where to aim yourself when putting yourself out there for services? Is it because the customer piece is so interesting to you, or is it because it's just what you believe is the core of business? How did you decide on that?
I do believe the customer is the core of the business, and I'm obsessive about it. I even think back to my days at Sears. The last year I was there, we didn't touch on this, but I actually moved into the retail side of the business. I also say sometimes you have to take a job that you don't love to know what you never want to do again. For me, that was the retail side of Sears. But what I learned there in that side of the business was the customer tells you a lot, whether they're talking about their behavior. And so like really digging in. I remember at Sears looking in, just getting curious again about the business and finding out gosh, at that time there was a certain percentage of customers we were scheduling for product deliveries where we didn't show up for the installation. And okay, that would make people mad because they took the day off of work and you don't show up. Well, to make matters worse, we reschedule and not show up the next. So we're trying to figure out why the call centers are blowing up and why people are so mad. And, within the Sears Holdings company, delivery, installation, and product are three different companies with different leaders that were working together. And so that's just another example that I bring into my consulting business of just getting curious and asking a ton of questions and getting access to that conveyor, so to speak, of watching how if a company's interested in revenue growth, okay, well, is there even a market for it? Let's start there. Let's go and get back
Yeah.
and see like, okay, is there enough for us to go get? If not, how do we open up that space and make a bigger addressable market? Okay, now that we know we have a big enough market out there, what are the product tweaks or service tweaks that really can line up our value prop to what they're looking for? Then you start to lean on the, okay, how do we close more of what we're already getting? That's a big follow-up point that a lot of people don't even pay attention to. There could be growth right there in that bucket, but also, okay, where are there partnerships we haven't explored? Like, what are all the sales channels that different industries use, and how can I look at learnings from other industries to see, like, okay, maybe partnerships could be an opportunity for us to get, our product or service
Hmm.
noticed by this new population of, people or groups, association, what have you. But that's really how I think about it. Just like, I'll just keep going back to getting curious about the business, watching the customer journey just brings that knowledge that you need to then bring it down into business.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to invite you to be a little bit negative with this next question. So now you're out there, in the market, and you have an offering of services and a really broad experience. I'm curious what you hear that has you just kind of put your head in your hands of like, no, this is not the way to do it. Or maybe it's a trigger for you to say, hey, this is the type of company that I could help. Maybe it's just discourse on LinkedIn that you think is wrong. Is there something out there that you're just saying that you're like, no, that's not right?
Hard for me to be negative. I'm a very
I've
positive.
kind of caught that. That's why I had to be very clear that I want you to tell me. You can frame it in here's how we solve it if you'd like.
I just think really there's just so much noise out there. It's hard for people to cut to the chase.
Hmm.
And there's just a lot of noise and a lot of distraction. And so being able to just really focus on what's important, whether it's to me, customer, the business, whoever your stakeholder is that you're, trying to solve something for, it's cutting through the noise because I can, I'll in my consulting business, I'll interview different stakeholders in the business. I actually don't run into this is the way we've always done it. I don't run into that. What I love to do is ask questions that lead people to think about, oh, gosh, I hadn't thought about it that way before. That's really interesting. And when you can get that peak of interest to kind of look at something from a different perspective, that's where some magic can happen. But there's a lot of noise out there. I mean, I'll have companies give me access to their reporting. Why are they even looking at this? Like, what action can they take from this information? Being able to sort through and understand what's important when you're trying to drive specific metrics. And the other thing is, I always go back to when I speak to a business owner and I understand what's important to them, and they change their mind sometimes. So if they get into the data and say, actually, I would be looking here, but I always bring myself back to like, this is what's important to them. How can I help them cut through the noise of like what everyone else is bringing to them in terms of problems and challenges? Like, you know what, if we solve for these two things, this is half of the noise that's, making you busier than you need to be.
That's really smart. And so our final question is maybe if you can go back to not 10-year-old Jess, but maybe someone who's listening to this interview and they're just starting out. Maybe they're deciding between being a CIA agent or a career in business, and they hear this and they think, "Wow, Jess's story is an awesome one." What advice would you give to someone who's just starting their journey?
It's 100% get mentorship. Number one. Uh, every story that I've told you today, there's been a mentor behind the scenes that's been helping me, guiding me. Why, when there's tools available to you, why would you try to go to them? And you'd be surprised how many people want to help you as a professional. And so reach out, look for mentorship. It doesn't have to be, it could be a coach. It could be, someone that you've worked with in the past. Invest in your network is number two. I'm fortunate to be able to plug into companies that are looking for fractional help or project-based work to allow me to thrive with JREV Solutions. But you've got to invest in your network. Everywhere you go, you meet people, you connect with them on LinkedIn. I also keep my LinkedIn very clean. I don't accept invites from people I don't know. I'll just respond back and say, hey, if you want to set up some time or, let me know what you're specifically interested in. But I want my LinkedIn network to be tight and clean so that I need to reach out, get into another company. I know I have that real connection. And then the last thing I'd say is just be confident in yourself and be willing to take risks. And I know that sounds trite, and a lot of people say that, but sometimes you just have to say, hey, this sounds really interesting, and I'm just going to go try it. It's not going to be that scary once you just jump in. Just have confidence in yourself and can figure it out. Those are the three biggest pieces of advice.
That's an awesome note to end on. Jess, thank you so much for your time. I loved hearing the story of all that you've done, of all that you're doing. We'll link, of course, to JREV Solutions in the show notes. If you want to get in touch with Jess, her link will be in there as well. And I hope that you have a fantastic Michigan winter and some travels to Key West, and that the Lions take second place in the NFC.
Thanks, Kevin.